I'm Joe Kane.
I'm Dan Kane.
I'm Sal Conca.
And I'm Wayne Heckler.
And this is the Imperfect Podcast.
Don't forget to check us out at hecklerkane.com and download our episodes on iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud.
To the bumper. So today we have Juliette Miranda from the Unwritable Rant, and she wrote the book Morning Neurosis.
Yeah, she's been a great friend of ours through the Podern family, which all of these podcasts that we network with help each other out and support each other. So we thought it'd be a great idea to bring her on, talk about her book, talk about all the great people she's interviewed. She's interviewed Eric Roberts and Ed Begley Jr. Right. Yeah, she interviewed Charlie Daniels, and she was in the music industry. She moved out to L.A. for a long time, and then she just wrote a book basically telling all the tales of love and rock and roll and all these, like, basically jackasses, quote unquote, she dated.
Yeah.
And
she's got a new book coming out. She's got a lot going on for her.
Exactly.
We're excited.
Exactly. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait to talk to her. And here she is, Juliette Miranda. Hey, Juliette. Welcome to the Imperfect Podcast.
Hey, y'all. How's it going?
We're doing just fine. No, Juliette has a podcast called The Unwritable Rant, and she reviews bourbon every week on her episode. So why don't you give the folks a little? We can give a teaser here for them. How do you describe that bourbon you're tasting right now?
All right. Well, first, got to take a sip. So hold, please. All right. This is a genius bourbon. It truly is. This is Russell's Reserve 10-year. It's got this really sort of smoky flavor to it, a little bit of vanilla. It's so smooth. And it's from the Wild Turkey family, which is a little bit surprising because I don't necessarily associate, really high quality bourbons with Wild Turkey. But this stuff, so good. Aged 10 years and is just so smooth and awesome.
Nice.
Very good. We'll have to all give that one a shot.
Sounds like you've done that before.
Oh, just a few times. Just a few.
Well, look, let's start this out. We're going to raise our glasses. We have some wine here that we're sipping. So we're going to all raise our glasses to you and to a great job that you've been doing on the Unwritable Rant. We've all been listening and enjoying profusely. And thank you for that little intro that your traditional intro.
Joe drank too much already.
Yeah, you got to cut the wine out, Joe. All right.
Well, cheers.
Cheers, Juliette.
Cheers.
Juliette is an eloquent writer, by the way. I read some of your essays online. I'm very impressed. I love it. Yeah.
Oh, why, thank you.
You're so descriptive. Your words speaking about New Orleans and in the driveway. I'm checking. I'm like, wow, she's good. I like it.
Yeah. So
let's writing is just a big passion of mine. Hemingway, Scott Fitzgerald. Those are my idols.
When did you start writing?
I've been writing since birth, I think. It's always just been a part of my life, whether I was journaling or, telling stories to friends. It's just something that I've been doing forever.
You came out with a pen in your hand.
I did pretty much. Yeah, a little stabby too, but that's all right.
Now, give us the journey to Morning Neurosis, right? Because that was a big deal for you. That's your first published book. Tell us the story of that and how it went. I mean, it's a partly true story, correct?
It is, yeah. It's based on my experiences living in Los Angeles, working in the music industry, and then kind of the course of events that led me back to Chicago to sort of reinvent myself. I say they're mostly true stories because, I change a few of the details here and there just to make sure that it makes sense. But for the most part, these are all things that have happened to me. So it's kind of like my podcast in book form.
Yep. And have you used your book, I guess, for inspiration for episodes, correct? I mean, is it basically, are you breaking down chapters of your book, so to speak, for episodes of the podcast, or?
Oh, no, not at all. I actually, some of the characters in the book have appeared in other stories on the podcast, but the book stands alone. I wouldn't want to repeat the stories just, for people who've, bought the book or who want to buy the book. So I like to keep separation there.
Yeah, that's cool. So you were out in L.A. in the music industry. How old? Well, you don't have to give your age. So, what? Give us a year though. Like, what year were you out in L.A. so we can get a reference for musical interpretation?
I can tell you that hair bands were having a moment.
Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful, yeah.
Okay. So fair enough. And what were you doing? Were you out there trying to be a performer? Were you out there just working at a label? What was the journey out in L.A.?
I was doing a little bit of everything. I went out there assuming I was going to be the next big thing on MTV, and that never really happened. But as a writer, I was able to find tons of gigs, writing rock reviews for magazines. And then I wound up doing publicity for a couple different record labels, all sorts of things here and there. I did PA jobs and TV, whatever I could get my hands on to do, I tried. But ultimately, after I think I was there for 7-ish years, I'd been laid off from 7 different jobs, and I kind of hit a wall where, nothing was working out for me. So that's what brought me back to Chicago, was that I had opportunities out here that I didn't have in LA.
Cool. So is there a hidden footage tape of you auditioning to be an MTV VJ?
There are a lot of videos. I do occasional commercial work out of Chicago. So if you're watching late night TV, you can actually see me in some random national spots.
Oh, well, I come to Chicago once a year at least. I usually come out for Lollapalooza or Riot Fest. So I'm always there.
Sure.
So I'm usually there pretty late night. I'm going to have to keep an eye out on the boob tube next time.
Yeah, no, one day you'll be watching, late night cable at 2:00 in the morning and be like, I know that chick.
Was that before or after the Total Gym commercial with Chuck Norris and Christy Brinkley? So where were you born with a pen?
No, I was actually born in Chicago, right out in the south suburbs.
Oh, Chicago was a journey home. I thought you were a Southern gal.
You know what? Everybody thinks that. I say the closest that I've come is the south side of the burbs. But we spend so much time in the South. I mean, I practically lived in New Orleans for a while. We're in Nashville a couple months out of every year. So it's a place that I'm very, very familiar with.
Well, you have a certain Southern charm to you, which is very beautiful and very awesome. And just getting back to your podcast, the intro to the podcast always has that Southern sort of New Orleans feel to it with the music that's in the beginning, and I love that.
Yeah, what tune is that?
I wish I could tell you his name. I'm going to have to get that back to you because he's an independent artist. In fact, I don't even think he's performing anymore. Oh, wow. He had one album up. I'm going to have to look for it because that one particular song just is so New Orleans, and it really kind of sets up the vibe for the show. Just kick back and ease into this great conversation kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what drew us into listening to it. I mean, every episode just kind of starts with, that feel, and everybody grab a glass and get the bourbon going.
It's got a guitar and trombone blasting away on a New Orleans feel, and I love it.
Yeah. I just fall in line.
I've yet to get to New Orleans. I don't know if any of you guys have. No. I'm dying to get some beignets and crawfish, though. That's
yes. I would kill for some gumbo right about now.
Well, I've heard your cooking journey, I'll say, on your podcast. You've spoken about cooking multiple times. The flambe episode was one of my favorites, where you attempted to light the kitchen on fire. So.
You want us to tell us a little bit about that?
I love cooking. I do. And I have had success doing it. I'm a very good cook, but the stories, of course, that are the most fun are the ones where things don't turn out the way you want them to. With that particular story, I went in with the best of intentions, thinking that I was going to make, this New Orleans style flamin' Cajun shrimp dish. And I was just ready. I had my lighter, I had the pot sizzling in front of me. And for whatever reason, those stupid shrimp would not catch on fire. It was the most frustrating thing I've ever been through. And I sat there, I had this lighter in my hand. I'm sloshing cognac into the dish, hoping that something will catch on fire. Finally, my guy had to wedge this thing out of my hands going, back away, just step away.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. And I'll call out how she says, my guy. I like how all the male figures in her stories are always, the names are left aside, which is fine. We know who your guy is, obviously. We'll save the names. So, sure. But I love the characters that you've created. There was the one in particular as well, the episode where you guys went to a casino and one of your exes was the dealer. So she shows up at the casino and she ends up with one of her exes as the dealer. And what was his name? I forget his name.
The Jackass.
The Jackass.
Right? How can you forget a name like that, Sal?
I'm sorry.
You have great code names.
Yeah.
He earned that one.
Yeah, there was the Jackass. Give us the rundown of some of the cast of characters, because the names are just phenomenal.
Right. There's the Jackass, obviously. There is the Pinball Wizard.
Yes.
The Warden. And I have a new character that's going to be coming up. She is the crazy blonde.
Oh boy.
Excellent.
I think we know her.
Everybody knows the crazy blonde. She was actually the one who accompanied me in the episode where we did that scavenger hunt with the pinball wizard.
That
funny.
one. I know which one you mean.
Yes.
So let's talk about the podcast some more. How long have you been podcasting? I think you're up to episode 71-ish. 72?
Yeah, so that puts me at about a year and a half-ish.
Okay. And what was the inspiration for launching said podcast? I mean, being a writer and doing that, you wanted to broaden your horizons or just...
Well, it was two things. For starters, I was just feeling frustrated as a writer because the way the publishing industry works right now is that it's incredibly hard. You know, it doesn't matter that I've already released one book. People just aren't reading the same way that they used to. Books aren't being published the way that they used to. So I was just, creatively, I was feeling a little bit stifled. So, my guy and I, we were sitting on the driveway, having some cocktails, and we were listening to Bill Burr, who is my favorite comedian on the planet. And his podcast was just so cool. It's laid back, it's conversational. And I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking, I can totally do that. So, it was just, I look at my guy and I said, you know what, let's give it a shot. And, he had some gear that we could use. And we just kind of, went from there.
Cool.
Nice.
Well,
Excellent.
and it's worked. It's worked out for you guys. You guys have had some pretty good legions of loyal fans behind you and getting you guys some recognition. I know you still tour for your book.
I wouldn't
and
use the word legions.
Now, did you have a cocktail on your?
A little bit.
Did you have a cocktail on your very first podcast? I'm curious. When did that start?
Yeah, I did it on my first podcast just because I thought it would loosen me up a little bit. So I was just drinking it throughout the episode. And as I kind of went along, I love bourbon. I love talking about it. I kind of liked the way that it lent itself to the, conversational aspect of it, and if you listen to the shows, please don't listen to the first episode, but if you do, you'll hear that it's kind of rambling and crazy, but they develop as they go along. And I kind of developed this, it's like, all right, we're sitting down, we're having our drink, and now we're going to tell stories. And I think it flows really well.
It takes a little while to get yourself going. I mean, even with us being honest with you, some of our earlier podcasts are atrocious. So
well, sure, you want to set them on fire. I know.
Yeah, but you know what? It's part of the learning experience. It's part of getting yourself out there, and you've definitely done a good job on that. You've turned it into something that, you really. I look forward to hearing the next podcast with you because I go, okay, it's really cool, and she's chill, and it's like you're very conversational with the way you go about your interviews and the way you address your topics.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Thank you for saying that because that's been my goal all along is just to make it feel, familiar.
Where did the interviews come into play and who was your first interview?
Actually, that was my producer's idea. He thought that it might kind of bring in some new listeners and it might be kind of a cool thing for me. So we initially just started talking to people who had written books. So my first interview was with Gary Wright, the musician. He sang that song Dreamweaver. He also wrote a book about his relationship with George Harrison of the Beatles. So that was kind of my first interview. And from there, we started targeting other authors. So after him came A.E. Hotchner, who was Ernest Hemingway's best friend. And that is hands down my favorite interview that I've ever done. I mean, just talking to somebody who was, best friends who went to Spain with Hemingway, who went to bullfights with him, who
Cool.
who has a book dedicated to him by Hemingway. I mean, he's the man. So, it went from there. And then we just started expanding. We started talking to musicians and actors, and it just became its own entity.
What got you into film and what types of films and movies are you into?
Well, when I was living in Los Angeles, I did a bunch of work in production. So I was a PA on a couple of different movie sets. I worked with a couple different directors just as a personal assistant. So I've always liked the process of making movies, and I love the creativity of it. It's all about storytelling in the end for me. So movies are just another way to do that.
Of course, yeah. Give us a quick, what are your top 3 movies of all time?
Well, I think number one would have to be Midnight in Paris, the Woody Allen movie. It's beautiful. It's set in the 1920s, and it's got, Ernest Hemingway in it and Fitzgerald. But beyond that, I am a huge horror movie fan. I mean, I like the weird, messed up horror movies, like the 70s exploitation style ones. So, maybe the original Last House on the Left. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another, the original one is great. And then I think, and this is going to sound really weird after saying that, but I love the Muppet movie.
We go from cut 'em up to a puppet.
Get it from all angles, right? It's all about the creativity.
Maybe that's what we're missing is a puppet cut 'em up movie.
Oh my God, Thrasher movie for Muppets.
The Muppet. That's it.
Maybe that's what we need to make.
Get over here. Come here.
It gives the Muppets Take Manhattan a whole new meaning.
That's terrifying.
Well, you'll have to.
Wait, you threw Smeagol in the middle of the Muppets.
I threw Smeagol. No, it's Mr. Jar Jar Binks.
Oh boy,
sorry, that was the worst.
So on the interview front, if you could interview anyone living, or passed away, or in the past, who would you want to interview and why?
I want to say that would be Jim Henson, because he was such an innovator. He came up with something that is beloved by people. And what I love about the Muppets so much is that they're kind of like regular people. They're wacky, they're crazy, they're snarky, a little mean sometimes. It's the best combination. I mean, and such heart at the same time. So just the legacy that he left behind, I would love to hear about his inspiration, right from him.
That's awesome. That's actually the second time Jim Henson's been brought up on the show.
Yes.
Because of we interviewed a filmmaker that produced a film called The Lookouts. It was a short film called The Lookouts, and it was a fantasy film. And it brought back, they used real puppetry in the film.
It was a basilisk.
Oh, Jesus. He finally got the word right after like 6 months. So
practicing it.
That's why I'm jumping in right there. It was a really cool creature.
Yeah, it was The Lookouts by Redgate Films, and it was a really cool short. It was based on a Penny Arcade novel, but it brought you back to, like, I don't know if you familiar with those movies like The Dark Crystal and The Never-Ending Story, those 80s fantasy movies, and this movie is shot in a modern feel.
No CGI. That's why it made such a difference.
Wow, that takes a lot of work.
Yes. Exactly. Well, apparently him and his it's a husband and wife team, and they spent a whole lot of time in the garage together building this puppet.
Sure.
Well, instead of telling the whole story, go check out the episode.
Yeah.
The cinematography is outstanding.
David Bousquet is his name. It's one of our past episodes.
Definitely.
Correct. Exactly. So, in terms of the podcast for you, we've heard you interview Eric Roberts, which was phenomenal, by the way, because we also spoke to the Eyes of the Roshi guys, which was pretty cool. So
Great guys.
I know. And so what was it like being able to chat with Eric Roberts on that and some of his past things? I know he was kind of a big deal for you.
He was, and it was crazy. I just going into interviews, when you're talking to somebody that you've admired, whose work that you've watched, for decades, it's a little daunting at first, but then he's just such a nice guy, so open and friendly and everything. You just kind of roll with the conversation. But I'll tell you, the moment when I had to just like pause and pick my jaw off the floor when he did his character from Pope at Greenwich Village and just did this like quick just impression of him. It was just so incredible to just know that I'm like talking to this guy and he's telling me his stories and he's telling me how he created this character. It's moments like that where, all the hard work and all the hours that you spend prepping for these interviews, that just makes it all worthwhile.
Well, during that interview, I could definitely hear the excitement in your voice as you were interviewing him. You were just genuinely giddy, not in a negative way, but giddy, talking to him. So
it's hard to contain sometimes.
Sure.
You hear that kind of talent, and you feed off of it.
I'd hate to see whatever you would be like if you got John Stamos on your show.
Oh boy!
Because being that he was your teen pen pal, I mean that would be just crazy.
Yes. Yes. My heartthrob.
Your teen heartthrob on Tiger Beat magazine or whatever that was.
Oh yeah, it was Teen Beat magazine, I think, and just getting that letter back from him, I swear to God, I have never had my day more made. It was just
was he
little girl going, he wrote to me, it means everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean those are great stories, and that's what's great about your show is all those great stories that you're sharing with everyone. How is it for you sharing so many personal stories, personal relationships, and things like that? Is it cathartic for you? Is it therapy for you? Is it something that you just enjoy doing? Because not a lot of people are that personal, right? I mean,
True, and I don't blame them for it because it definitely takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there that way. I think it initially started off as therapy for me. I think my book kind of was. I was trying to work out the details of a really messed up relationship, and I did a lot of that through writing the book. But now it's just fun.
well, Joe won't even let me share pictures of my food on Instagram, so
Oh, come on. This is a whole other
Nobody
story.
wants to see your food.
I'm very non-food driven, and I'm the only one at the table who's non-food driven. Everybody here is a foodie. And I'm very much like, food is to survive, and you do what you got to do. And he's posting pictures on the Instagram, on the Heckler Kane Instagram. And you know what? If anybody's listening, hit us up on Twitter at Heckler Kane Inc. and let us know whether you like food pictures or not. I asked him to take it down. I'm like, take that down.
Well, I did tweet a lovely picture of my breakfast this morning with my strawberry pancakes, and it was lovely.
Well, that's your own Twitter.
Oh no, it was the Heckler Kane Twitter.
Oh, I missed that one.
Sorry, Juliette, we're putting you in the middle of our food fight.
No, I understand.
That was
Food is
always
very
fun
important.
in high school, so why not? Food fights.
See, well, you're a solo host. You don't have this. You gotta, in here we have 4 guys jockeying for position.
We're all looking for airtime. That's all.
Yeah, see, I can't compete. I have to have sole microphone rights.
Absolutely.
So it looks like you have some projects coming up as well. You're going to be a featured character in the upcoming Snug Comics graphic novel, The Kindred, which is coming out in February. What is that? I have no idea what that is. No, I'm curious to hear.
Well, one of the artists reached out to me a while back. It's going to be an adaptation of the 80s horror movie, The Kindred. So it's about a woman who inherits a home and finds out that the stuff that her, family left in the basement is a little bit more creepy than she anticipated. So he actually has an actress that he's modifying as a character for the lead. And then I'm playing the small town bourbon drinking sheriff. It's like a graphic novel. It's very cool. I've seen some of the sketches of it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the whole thing turns out.
Cool.
So the bourbon thing was added in, right, for you?
Yeah, well,
I'm assuming.
Especially written for you. This is a moment. Yes.
That was kind of the idea, in addition to, making the character look like me, he wanted to make sure that she had some traits of the South, sort of. I'm from the South, not exactly, but she says y'all a lot. She drinks bourbon. So, it's identifiable as being me.
Yeah.
That's so
Nice.
cool. So you'll be forever
Immortalized.
immortalized in the graphic novel.
Scratch that one off the bucket list.
Absolutely.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So next up, I think you're appearing on the Joey Canyon Show on Comcast DirecTV in the coming months. I don't know what the Joey Canyon Show is. Do you guys?
Nope.
Is it a local show? Is it national? I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's a national show.
Okay.
It's broadcast out of Colorado. He was actually a guest on my show in the late summer. He's a country music artist, and his show is kind of like a modern-day variety show. He has bands on. He brings people in to talk about what they're doing. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. He flew me out there for a couple of days. Got to hang out on set, see the band Exile perform,
Nice.
and then, hang out and talk about the podcast.
Cool. That's nice.
Very neat.
That's great. And we know most recently your latest podcast was a best of for 2016. And if anybody hasn't checked you out yet, it's the Unwritable Rant. They can find you on Twitter at Morning Neurosis. And, you've interviewed some greats. We mentioned Eric Roberts, but there's also Charlie Daniels, Ed Begley Jr., the list goes on and on. I know I had some of my favorites, and we can probably talk about interviews all night long here. But I wanted to thank you for your time. I think it was amazing to have you on, Juliette. You're part of the Podern family, which we're all part of, so we've appreciated your support for us and your guy, who's behind the scenes chatting with me all the time. So wanted to say thanks again, and cheers.
Well, cheers to you guys. Thanks
Cheers
for
to
having
you.
me on.
Cheers.
We
Thank
wish
you.
you future success for the new year. Getting bigger all the time.
Fingers crossed.
Exactly. Thanks again, Juliette. This has been fun
Yeah,
for us.
we
I hope you
appreciate
enjoyed
it.
it.
Yeah, you're very cool.
Yeah,
Thanks
I
for
loved
joining
it.
us. Yeah, it was a pleasure.